Hello everyone, welcome to Chapter 11, Design Disciplined. We will be talking about different kinds of design today, but we'll mainly be focusing on graphic design. So what is graphic design? Now graphic design over the years has kind of evolved from a few simple things to kind of a range of very different kind of disciplines. But graphic design, simply put, is the process of working with words and pictures to enhance visual communication. It's a way for designers to communicate visually, whether it is using illustration or photography or sometimes even moving images. Particularly, a lot of designer work with typography. Now, what typography is the art and technique of composing and printed material from letter forms. And sometimes we call that typefaces or fonts. And I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar with some of the typefaces and fonts that we use normally. Like if you open up a Word document, usually the default font or typeface for the words are Times New Roman, it's Times New Roman. And a lot of the very default font for Apple computers is Helvetica, which in a computer PC, that would be the equivalent of Arial. So typography is very interesting because we write words and we write types, but when it comes to computer generated typography or even hand-drawn typography, there is very specific way of structuring the type so that it looks correct and is legible. And so here are some of the words that we associate the anatomy of typography. Now, the very important things for you to know for this chapter is serif. What a serif is they're short lines with pointed ends at an angle to the main stroke. So, for example, this word typography, as you can see right here, is a serif type because at the end of each stroke, there's a little embellishments that sticks out from it, okay? And the words anatomy of type at the very, very top of this particular image is what we call a sans serif type. And they don't have little embellishment at the end of each stroke. It's very clean, it's very geometric, it's very minimal. They're all straight lines and round curves. There's no little things that sticks out at the end. So a type like Times New Roman, it would be a serif type because it's got serifs at the end of it. And a type like Helvetica or Arial, it would be a sans serif type because there's no little things that sticks out at the end of the strokes. Now, X-high are the height that we refer to for a particular typography. So an X-high is how tall the words are or how tall the characters are. And we have ascenders, which is things that stick out on the top. So like the character H in typography has an ascender because this goes beyond the rest of the characters. And then we have descenders, which are found in characters like Y and P, G, that goes below the rest of the characters, and it goes below what we call the baseline. So ascenders go beyond the mean line and descender goes below the baseline. Now, the spaces between each characters, we call it kerning. And kerning is not shown in this particular image right here, but is spelled Kerning. And that is really the spacing between each characters. And from all the different X-high, serifs, ascender, descender, and how tall everything is, how small, what the proportion are between the characters in the actual size of the kerning, you can really make a word look very different or more legible or less legible by dealing with these different elements. So a good example is this particular typography by Donald Meeker. It's called Clearview Highway Typeface. And he developed this particular typeface in 2004 to replace whatever we had before. And as you can see, at the sketches at the bottom right here, the R and the A, you can see that he went from a smaller A to a bigger A with a bigger empty space. So right here, the FHWA Highway E modify is what we were using before. And actually the Clearview 1 Highway BD55 on the right hand side is what we use now, what he has developed. So as you can see, the X high of the new character A is actually taller than what it was before. So actually the contrast between the capital letter R and the lowercase a is not that much. They're almost the same height. So this just kind of gives you a more a better legibility as you're driving past, because when we're looking at signs, when we're driving past, you're really only spending a fraction of a second to really glance at these signs, but notice how short of a time you look at it, but how clearly you can see these words. And notice the kerning between the characters are very wide, so the letters are kind of spread out. And also notice that they're not all capital letters. They're actually uppercase and lowercase letters, because usually our brain, it's more difficult for our brains to process all caps letters, because when you're writing in all caps, what does it look like? It looks like somebody's yelling at you, right? So this Clearview Highway typeface was developed for high level of legibility. Even at night, you would be able to see it much better than the type of typeface we had before. Now, as designer goes, Heidi Cody in 2000 really designed these series of letters. She herself did not design them, because if you notice closely, you can see that these alphabets is actually words from different American groceries. So I can only recognize a few. I can't recognize all of them, but I'm sure you guys can see all of them. You see the E from Eggo, and the L from Lysol. I see R from Reese's Pieces. I see the M from M&M, and the S from Starburst, and even the Y from York chocolate. And so she did this series of letters to kind of show, the brand identity and how strong brand image can kind of creep into our lives. So it's amazing how you don't see the actual word Eggo, but when you see that E, that red letter E, the way that it is designed against the yellow background, automatically you think of Eggo, and perhaps it will make you want to crave Eggo. And then what is it going to make you do? You're going to go to the store and you're going to buy some Eggo. So this really has to do with not just brand identity, but it has to do with consumerism, and it really has to do with advertisement and how graphic design all ties into this one big lump of capitalism. So speaking of capitalism, speaking of consumerism, speaking of shopping and brand identities, we have to talk about logos. So logos is an identifying mark or trademark based on letter forms or pictorial elements. So it could be a letter or two or three, or it could be a word, it could be elements, it could be just pictures, it could be just shapes. Logos is really what represent an idea, represent a company a lot of the times when we think about it. So here are all the logos that we may or may not be familiar with, but this just kind of shows you that logo can come in very different forms. If you notice on the left hand side towards the bottom there's the logo for Nike, and it's a brilliant logo because all it is just a swoosh. It's just a check mark, but every time you see it, immediately you think of the tagline, "Just do it." And immediately you think of a very prestige sporting event or very prestige sporting goods. And it makes you want to shop. It makes you want to buy it. There are a lot of things that's like that. And then again, like McDonald's logo, if you see those golden arches driving down the highway, you know immediately what you're coming to. For a logo that is a little bit more typographically based, you can look at Starbucks coffee. which actually now they have gotten rid of the words and it's just that logo, the mermaid in the middle. If you look up from there, you see Dove's logo. It's just the word Dove with a small image of a dove underneath it. So you see the contrast of all these different types of logo and what it does, and how it impacts your life and what it makes you think of. Okay. So lastly, though, we're going to talk about graphic design in a more artistic and perhaps a little bit more humorous way, and the way how it could convey a message and not just an idea, but is trying to say something and telling us a story. This particular artwork and design is actually a cover for The New Yorker in 2001 in December, and it's by Myra Coleman and Rick Meyerowitz. And if you look closely, it is actually a very primitive, sketchy looking map for New York. The yellow part is actually supposed to represent Manhattan, and then the red part is kind of where Brooklyn is, and then the green part is going into more like Queens area. And then notice the words that are actually in these little segments. You see Botoxia, you see mulas, you see Hippopabad. I also see Alzheimer's, Taxistan. It's very hard to read these words, and I think there's actually a Trump something there. Oh yeah, a Trumpistan. And so basically, it is trying to play on the fact that the New York map is looking kind of like a Middle Eastern map. It's looking like there's a Middle Eastern country and segments of it all within it. And the title of this piece is called New Yorkistan. And so you could really see that this design really allowed the New Yorkers to laugh at themselves again after the tragedy of September 11 with the attack and all. So you see that graphic design isn't only making logos or doing typography and making signs, but it's also illustrations such as this, and trying to make an artwork that kind of conveys something or trying to express an idea. And so that is pretty much what we're going to talk about for chapter 11, and that is kind of concluding our week for this week. And next week we'll be talking about a few other things like sculptures and architecture and craft. So have a good week and Happy New Year's, everybody, and stay safe, and I will see you guys next week.